Hello and welcome to Coaching Corner with me, Tracy Forsyth, founder of Fasttrack to Fearless. Today's theme is the leader as coach. And I'm joined by a special guest. His name is Steve Hamilton Clark. He is the Chief Coaching Officer at the Henke Institute. And in my opinion, he's a perfect person to discuss how and why leaders should adopt coaching techniques if they want to increase their leadership effectiveness. So welcome, Steve.
Thank you, Tracy, for having me on your show.
I was going to say that you're all the way from sunny, or rather windy, Vancouver in Canada. Yeah. Brilliant.
Today is definitely windy.
Windy, yeah. So listen, Steve, tell us, what does Henke mean and what is the Henke Institute?
I'll do the other way around if I can. There we go. Creative thing. The Henke Institute is essentially a training institute accredited by the International Coach Federation. And our primary aim is to bring a coaching philosophy into people's leadership style. And there are many different leadership styles. Coaching is one of them. And it happens to be one that is much needed today. So we can get back into that later. What does Henke stand for? Well, it's a Japanese word that means change and transformation. And so we felt, my two partners, myself, felt that was an appropriate name to take on board in terms of how do you transform organizations? Well, you need to help teams transform. Well, how do you help teams transform? Well, you need to focus on the individual leader. So, high potential, high performing leaders influence high performing teams, influence high performing organizations. And then that's how transformational change happens. So Henke is all about sustainable transformation in a nutshell.
So as I understand it, and I do know this, but leaders come to Henke to learn coaching techniques that they then take back into their leadership. Yeah.
It's essentially, yeah, nicely bottom line.
Yeah. Okay. And so just give us the
and maybe a little twist onto it. Instead of learning, I would emphasize the word experience.
Yeah. Experience. Okay.
So there's a lot more experience than teach. There's lots more helping people find their own solutions to what coaching looks like for them, rather than telling them exactly what it needs to be. So that, because leadership is contextual, and so in some respects, so is coaching. So it's all about bringing it alive in the way that works for you.
Yeah. Okay.
And I think that's what makes us a little bit different. Yeah.
And give us the context. Why is the time right now for leaders to learn coaching techniques?
I'm trying to think of a pillar. I was going to bring up the Ukrainian war, perhaps, and Zelensky and how he's leading right now. And it may be controversial, may not be. The point is that leadership there has been democratized and spread. And it's one of the reasons, among many, that the Ukrainian army are able to do what they do. And that's the new way of leadership. It is, there's no longer these hierarchies, or the hierarchies are very much collapsing. Even the US Army, who have satisfaction rates of, I think, 90+%, and 80% of them are millennials. They've changed their leadership style to be interdependent. And so it isn't about a hierarchy, it's about working together. To be able to do that, you need to be able to listen differently. You need to be able to ask questions differently. And you need to be able to power with and not power over when you're in this kind of hierarchy. And it's a big trend happening across companies. And leaders who recognize that, and recognize that whatever can be shared will be shared because of the internet and the democratization of information, they've got to lean into their teams now more than they ever have before, because leaders simply don't have all the answers. It's amazing.
And I think, the words perma-crisis have come up recently, because we've been living in this perma-crisis, it seems, one way or the other for the last 6 years. But also the word VUCA, VUCA, as I've spoken to you about before. Could you explain a little bit about VUCA and permacrisis, and underline a little bit more about why the world at large now, why that control, command, leadership just doesn't work anymore, or in theory?
Well, the VUCA stands for volatile, uncertain, chaotic, and ambiguity or ambiguous. And that's the world that we live in. And it's a lot more interconnected than it ever was before. The whole world is interconnected. Wheat right now, because Ukraine's interconnected. The healthcare, China, everything's interconnected, and it's very complicated. And so how do you navigate that in a so much more complicated world? Well, you navigate it with others. And where coaching plays an important role is when people start understanding why they do what they do. What's their purpose? When they start questioning what their values are and which ones they need to start honoring, then they're able to navigate and take decisions that have the impact that need to happen. So that's why coaching is becoming so important in this VUCA perma crisis world, is because how do I navigate it? And coaching provides some fantastic philosophies and tools to do that. One of them is purpose, another one is values, another is sage voices, and those are probably the three big ones for me, at least.
Yeah. Can you explain a little? Can you unpack those three things just a little bit more?
Oh yeah. Well, I mean, Simon Sinek's done a lot in terms of, the why, in terms of the organizations. Why do organizations do what they do? People don't buy what you do; they buy why you do it. And so when leaders are able to start understanding what motivates them deep down intrinsically, like, why do I do what I do? They then stop relying on sort of the number of stars they have on their shoulder or lapels, and start focusing on, well, how can I make a difference with others? And so purpose is a fantastic motivating tool. What are we here to achieve? Why do we exist? Fairly existential question, perhaps. And it's a powerful way of keeping a North Star, keeping you focused, so that when you get into too much of the how and stuck in the VUCA, you can come back out again and say, okay, where are we going here? And then jump back in again. So that's the purpose one. The purpose one's your true core. It's your inner magic. I'll bottom line it, inner magic.
Yeah.
And bringing in that to the surface.
And I think just
to
interject, I think purpose, it's one of those things that before I really studied it, it was like, oh, purpose, what's your purpose? How would you know your purpose? What is it just some sort of esoteric thing? But I think, that whole thing about actually, if you were at war, if you were a soldier in the war and you got stopped in enemy territory and they said, state your mission, what's your purpose? And you didn't have a convincing answer, then it would be, over. So I think having that defining what your purpose is, just for me and for many of my clients, it's just like understanding whether they're on the right track, as you say, to get to their North Star. And it helps clarify your decision making, and it just helps you understand why things resonate or what's the opposite of resonate? Dissonate. I don't know whether that's a word. Anyway,
dissonance.
I just wanted to add that. Yeah. So
absolutely.
Yeah. Sorry, I interrupted. So values.
Values. Yeah. I mean, values are that sort of invisible framework that we use for making decisions. And many people don't know what their values really are until they've been stepped on. And so bringing those up to the surface again, I keep mine right in front of me. Connection, clarity, celebration, creativity, collaboration, courage, my 6 C's. And I keep them in front of me just to remind you about, when I'm making decisions, which one of those do I want to honor, one or more? And again, great way of navigating a VUCA world. And then the last one is all about sage voices. By the way, Roy Disney, Roy Disney, he says, it's not hard to make decisions when you know what your values are.
Yeah.
So, I mean, it's been around for a while. Companies have values.
Yes.
Right? And as individuals, yes.
And I think, Steve, that it's true that companies have values. I used to work at a company which had a little card that you could carry around with the values of the company at the back of it. But I think, I'm not sure that really resonated with all the staff. So I think as leaders, having that discussion about values with the team. What do we stand for? How do we want to be? Getting people on board with what their values are. I think it's really important, because you can't hand down values, can you? You can't pass them on. Or what's your opinion on that?
Absolutely. And so an organization can have values in terms of this is how we want to behave broadly. How that then gets interpreted within teams is up to the teams to bring that alive the way they best see fit. And probably the most important, something that shows up a lot in my coaching is this concept of collaboration. How do we get collaboration? Well, there are many answers to that. One of them is, how do we want to behave with each other? And when people start defining how we want to behave as a team, they start getting into the values of what is good behavior and what is behavior that perhaps isn't conducive to collaboration. And then all of a sudden, values start playing a big role in the team making decisions.
Yeah, and it can really, it's not just a woolly, airy-fairy thing. It's that can actually mean, in terms of like having an agreement about behaviors, that it provides you clarity on what is acceptable, what is not acceptable. So it has a real life relevance and practical output. So you talked about purpose, you talked about values. What was the third one? You've mentioned three things.
Well, maybe bring the values one alive in terms of, well, values, get it conceptually, but what does that look like in real life when it's played out? Well, I've known boards to have a little red ball, a foam ball. And, people don't purposely go out to step on other people's values or talk too much or denigrate others. It can happen. And a really nice technique is having a little foam red ball. That when somebody in the board is actually stepped over the mark, you can roll it over to them, throw it at them, and it changes the energy in the boardroom. The person then realizes, okay, what just happened? What did I do, or how did I show up that's kind of gone over the mark? And it becomes a learning opportunity for the board to then reset and go back to where they want to. So that's a very practical example of when we know what our values are and when they've been transgressed, we've got tools to be able to then reset and get back onto where we need to go to. Yeah. So just a simple practical example.
Yes, excellent. And sorry, there was a third thing. You said purpose, values, and
sages. Sage voices.
Sage voices. Tell us about that. What is that?
Hey, everybody has inner talk voices that we have in our heads. Everybody's got them, and a lot of the voices that we have are ones that actually don't serve us. They help us survive, but they don't help us thrive. Because we're born into this world, neocortex brain thinks that it's a dangerous world. And so we develop a bunch of coping mechanisms, hyperachieving or trying to please people, or is avoiding things and, fight, flight, freeze, and appease type things. And a lot of that it becomes automatic behavior. And after a while, you kind of look around and go, actually, I'm still alive. And yet I'm under a lot of stress, or I feel stressed, I feel a lot of anxiety. And it's because I've used coping mechanisms of some form, working too hard or avoiding confrontation or avoiding difficult conversations. And so there comes a time to start reflecting on those voices and start saying, well, what does my inner wisdom actually say? And to try and get those inner wisdom voices to come up on top and start being led by your inner wisdom. So after you've been around for 20, 25, 30 years or more, having a look at those voices, the ones that are serving you and the ones that aren't, is a very powerful way of, again, making decisions. Leadership's all about having impact through making decisions.
Yeah.
So I suppose if you align your decisions to your purpose, if you honor your values and you action the wisdom of your sage voices, you're going to be in a better space than you would be if you didn't. And I purposely said align, honor, and action because that spells aha.
I love that. I love that. Yeah. And talking about your sage voices, that's what I call, and that inner narrative, that's what I call inner critics and then inner champions.
Yes.
So it's that, and it's so incredibly, and I love that way that you talk about, actually you have those inner critics because we need to survive. They're all about protecting us and keeping us safe, but the damage to the risk there is that we keep ourselves too small. And then I love that, you know, that actually the inner champion or the sage voices are helping you to thrive. I love that. I love that. Okay, so tell us a little bit about just a little bit more generally then. So we just discussed a bit about the coach's leader as coach, coach as leader, leader as coach, either which way, learning some of these techniques. So in terms of like, you talked about purpose, values, sage voices, but if leaders who've got no intention of becoming coaches, just adopting a few kind of coaching techniques, what kind of techniques would they be? Like, just to give a good example.
So I would encourage leaders to move from techniques to ways of being. And a lot of the business schools have recognized that there aren't a lot of good leaders, or there could be better leaders out there if we were more aware of who we were being when we were doing. So the business schools are very good at teaching the knowledge and how to apply the knowledge. You know, what I know is important, what I do really matters, but who I'm being is everything. And so that's where I'd go to, is how he's showing up. And a lot of that comes down to, what's my energy like? And how am I connecting with others? And so the real technique, or really way of being, is being self-aware of the energy that you're creating, the climate that you're creating with others, whether it's one-on-one or in a team or in a larger group. Leaders who are able to ask themselves that question, you know, what is the climate that I'm creating in the moment, right? They're talking, and in the moment say, okay, what's the climate like here? And they're able to test it and then change their behavior or adapt their behavior to shift the climate towards something that's more collaborative, or perhaps to a climate that's a bit more less collaborative, depending on what's needed. Those are the leaders who are going to have the greatest impact. And again, I come back to the word impact. So yeah. Be aware of the climate that you are creating.
Yeah. And in terms of like, and this is something that I've spoke to you before about, in terms of climate, there's a difference that I've learned from you, is like there's a whole psychological safety aspect to it, isn't it? Like, if you have a climate that's ruled by fear and command control and my way or the highway, then it's very closed. But the leader as coach creates this climate where, well, you carry on. I want to hear from you.
Well, what is the climate that you want to create to achieve the goals? And perhaps this is one of the techniques, if you will. Ask, right? What's success going to look like together? And find and develop the climate with others in the team, or the other person that you're with. Spend that time to manage expectations to create that climate. Call it psychological safety, you will, but that ability to be able to say things and recognize that you're not going to be belittled for saying maybe what is stupid to somebody, and that's okay. Yeah. Right? Everything goes. Everybody gets to be right. Everybody gets to be wrong. And so purposely creating that climate openly with somebody else in terms of managing expectations is a key technique to collaboration, to creating a sense of connection. Right? A sense of connection. Ultimately, what we're talking about here is creating a sense of trust. Right? So when we're connected, we feel good, oxytocin's running through our veins, and guess what? Trust levels go up. And all of a sudden, people's, perspectives start opening up, and we get to see more of what's possible than if we were in a more protect state of mind.
That's lovely. And one of the key things that you spoke about right at the beginning, you mentioned it was listening. So tell us a little bit about the role of listening, and how just by tweaking tiny things, it can be a transformative in leadership.
It's a big, 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 big topic, the whole listening piece. And really, again, a technique. Go back to your question. If there was a technique to ask in terms of a way of being, is ask what only questions. Oh, like what? What makes you say that? What would success look like? And if you can keep them down to 3 or 4 word questions, even more powerful, because it's about getting curious. Right? That's the piece here.
Yeah.
So asking what questions. So, and interestingly, there's some studies that are done. One of the most difficult things that leaders find difficult to do is asking questions to which they don't have the answer.
Yes.
Command and control. I'm the leader. I'm supposed to have all the answers. And leaders who are able to overcome that genuinely get curious with and for others in their teams by asking what question, and they don't have the answer, are a lot more likely to help empower others find their answers and have greater impact in the organization, and in the process create that psychological safety.
Yeah.
So there's another technique, if you will.
Yeah, I think that's such a key one, because I work with so many leaders who are worried because they don't know everything. And, you know, when you step up from leading a division to being CEO or whatever, C-suite, and or taking on a strategic leadership role, a seat at the board, you're going to be in charge of departments where you cannot possibly just fast track yourself through 20 years of learning it. So that, I think that's such a key one, is like owning what you know, owning what you don't know, and having the courage and the confidence to ask others,
And humility.
I also think it lets other people shine. And no, gone are the days where you're supposed, there's just, as you say, that control command where you might have worked in a factory and the CEO of the factory had done every single job along the way. Leaders today, as you say, you know, they have to be in charge of things that they don't necessarily have 20 years experience from. So asking those what questions, such an incredible simple but effective. Yeah. What open-ended questions.
Yeah, absolutely. They take us into the future. All right. What questions take us into the future?
Yeah.
And that's where we want to be.
Yeah.
Right? Successful in the future.
Yeah. So the formula, I think, is, you know, leader as coach equals a better chance of growth and transformation in companies. Am I right?
Yeah, absolutely. And the Henke model, at the core of the Henke model, we call it the sort of the Henke Q, if you will. It's all about sustainable performance. And we encourage people to look at their head, their heart, their hunger, and the human spirit, and to tap into each other. Leading from your head, leading from your heart, leading from your purpose or your passion, and then also deep respect for the human spirit. And when you're able to step into those perspectives and recognize which one you need to step in, depending on the situation, because they're all in balance, you're going to have more impact. And to bring that alive for you and for the audience, think of the 4 colors. Well, 3 primary colors, but my printer has 4. Blue, yellow, black, and cyan, or whatever it is. Imagine those 4 colors, and I can print any color I want. And so, as a leader, if you're able to recognize that you've got this color called head, you've got a heart, you've got the passion piece, or the hunger and purpose, and then you've got the human spirit. You can paint any color that you want, create any climate that you want, depending on which ones you tap into. And leaders who are able to consciously, self-aware do that are, again, going to have greater impact in their business.
Yeah, fantastic. And tell us a little bit about, so if people want to learn more about Henke, or if a leader is listening and thinks, you know what, I really am interested, what should they do, or what is available?
Well, listen carefully, because Henke has so many different spellings depending on how you hear it. So listen carefully. Henke is spelled H as in hotel, E as in echo, N as in November, K as in kilo, that's the key one, and then A is in alpha. So Henke, Henka. So just type in Henke Institute in your Google search, and our page will come up, and you've got all the details with the programs that we have to offer, and any other information that you would want.
Okay, wonderful. Well, I just want to thank you so much for joining me, Steve, all the way from windy Vancouver. I have heard a few, you were saying that you're in a howling gale, so I have heard some bangs and stuff. So I hope your roof is still on your house. But yeah,
I hope so too.
Yeah, so I want to thank you for joining us on Coaching Corner. So everybody watching, leaders watching, yeah, have Google Henker, have a look at coaching techniques that you can use to transform your companies and transform your leadership, and ensure growth and transformation in this crazy VUCA world. All right, so that's it for Coaching Corner, and I will see you next week.